Welcome to the Troy Stober Show. You don't have to listen, but you're going to hear about it anyway.
You don't have to listen, but you're going to hear about it anyway. Welcome to the Troy Stober Show. I'm your host, Troy Stober. I have a special guest, Karen Rush, with me today. Before we get to her story and hear about her inspiration, I want to mention our sponsor. The studio sponsor is Cox Electric, located in Salem, Oregon. They are your expertise for residential and commercial electrical services, including installation, renovation, fabrication, repair, and remodeling. Online at coxelectricoregon.com. Cox Electric, get lit. Okay. And I do mean lighting. Okay, for all you people who need clarification. Karen Rush, thank you so much for coming today. It's a pleasure to have you here. I have been doing the podcast now for several episodes, and sometimes we talk about kind of personal things, personal hobbies. In your case, you are the executive director of Children's Center. So I thought that it would be a good opportunity for us to learn a little bit about Children's Center, and you could kind of tell me your take on the services that are provided there. Before we get started, though, I want to know a little bit about your background. So tell me where you're from, where'd you grow up, where'd you go to college, and how did you get to where you are?
Well, I actually grew up all over the country because my dad was in the military, and but I kind of think of home as being Virginia, and so I grew up there. Also lived in Boston, Massachusetts, and then my family moved to Minneapolis when I was 16 years old. So that's where I went to high school, and then where I went to college. I went to undergraduate and graduate school at the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
But my family's still there, and I went to graduate school there and met my husband there, so I still have a lot of love for Minnesota.
And you came out here to be a professor.
I did.
Okay, so
yes.
pick me up there.
Okay. So I started moving west. My husband and I definitely knew that we wanted to live somewhere not in the Midwest because it was a little bit cold and not totally us. So I was offered a position as an assistant professor at the University of Oregon in school psychology, which was what I had gotten my doctorate in.
Gotcha.
And
gotcha. Do you prefer to go by Dr. Rush, or do I just call you Karen?
Karen's great for me, yeah. So I had two job offers. I had SUNY Buffalo or University of Oregon, and getting off the airplanes in February pretty much sealed the deal for Oregon. So my husband and I have lived here now for 25 years. I totally thought that I wanted to be a professor and a researcher, but 3 years of doing that, I realized that it just didn't have that sense of meaning and purpose that I really needed to feel in my own work. And so working with children really did that for me, particularly working with children with disabilities. That was the area that I was most interested in, particularly children with emotional and behavioral disorders. So
Gotcha. Okay.
I came up to North Clackamas School District, got a job as a school psychologist, stayed there for 20 years in various roles. I was an elementary school principal, I was director of early learning, I was director of elementary programs.
That sounds challenging. Emotional challenges in children. I mean, I can imagine some pretty significant impairments and some pretty significant interventions that might be needed. So
yeah, it just is something that it's not for everybody, but it was for me. And it just was something that I felt like I could make a connection with kids. And like I've always believed that the most important thing that a child needs to feel is that you care about them. And if they feel that, then they can begin to trust you. And if they can begin to trust that the world is a place where there's someone who cares about me and wants to keep me safe, that can create just tremendous healing in their lives and change the trajectory. And so that was just always my goal in working with children like that.
It's so inspirational, and it's so accurate too. I mean, people taking the time to listen to children and care about children, what an impact that makes.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up at Children's Center.
Okay.
But because I was very happy as an elementary school principal, but then the position opened at Children's Center, and it just really inspired me.
Okay.
I was like, I've been doing this work with children, and I think I've done a good job for a while, but here's an opportunity to really work with the kids who maybe most need us. And to do some good in the world in a completely different way than I'd been doing it before. I was very scared. I'll admit it was a really difficult change for me because I kind of thought I would just retire as an elementary school principal. I was delighted and happy to do that. But when I saw this job opening, it was just like a voice inside of me said, you know what, you've got to do something. This is maybe something somewhere where you might make a difference.
And so not only are you using your expertise in children and families, you're also a leader and a budgeter. And I mean, the list of roles that you have now goes on quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah. So, as a nonprofit director, especially for a small nonprofit like Children's Center, where I don't have a lot of people doing other jobs, it is, you're doing a lot of the work. I mean, there are incredible folks that I work with, the medical director and the finance director and the development director. But we are such a great team. We work together really hard.
Tell me about the services that you provide at Children's Center. So for those of us who aren't familiar with it, where is it located, and what is the clientele like? What are the services that you provide to children and families?
All right. Well, Children's Center is in Oregon City, but we serve all of Clackamas County. And we are the Child Advocacy Center for Clackamas County. And Child Advocacy Centers, they're all over the country. There's almost 1,000 of them all around the country. And they are required in the state of Oregon. So by law. So every county must have a child advocacy center.
Okay.
And the purpose of the Child Advocacy Center is to support when there are concerns for abuse or neglect of a child.
Okay.
And they were originally developed at a time when people were realizing that child abuse was a significant issue in communities, but communities weren't necessarily well equipped to help kids through that process. We do 3 different things at our center. Okay. They're all connected, but we do assessments when there's a concern for child abuse or neglect. We do a pretty comprehensive assessment, which I'll talk more about. Okay. We also provide therapy. So for some children, we refer them to they refer them after an assessment. We may refer them to our therapy services. Okay. And we do a very specialized kind of therapy called trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's a therapy with the child and the caregiver. They do some things separate, they do some things together. But the idea is that you're creating a team that can move forward and help the child cope with the situation that is, the trauma that has occurred, help them understand and integrate it, and be able to move on from it and develop those coping skills for any future things that come forward to them.
Maybe we should clone this Child Advocacy Center and make it available to doesn't every family need that? I don't think it's just limited to people affected by abuse. But,
I'm a mental health person, so I think everybody would benefit from. We all have the opportunity to heal and grow from whatever's happened to us, and that's why I became a psychologist. But the third thing that we do is prevention. So we try to educate and work with our community to understand what they can be doing to prevent abuse from happening in the first place. Okay.
I would think that that would be a huge focus of any community because, these days, it's more apparent than ever that if you can work and invest some resources on the front end and prevent things, it has a much better downstream impact on what you're trying to accomplish, which is healthy kids and healthy parents and healthy families.
You may not want to get me started on that one, but it's frustrating because as a society, we are very interested and used to solving problems or trying to fix problems after they've already happened because that's what's urgent. That's what gets our attention. I don't remember who said this, but it's the tyranny of the urgent.
I have a theory, and that is adults vote and they have money, and children don't necessarily have much power in the larger scheme of things. And yet, parenting, education, all these things that have huge impacts. Oh boy, we're on the soapbox now, Karen.
I know you did not want to get me started.
They're just so critical. And so, I mean, I appreciate what Children's Center does. They evaluate child abuse. They kind of provide treatment afterward, and they prevent it. That's your mission?
Yeah.
Children's Center?
Yeah. So
tell me-
our mission is to end child abuse and neglect through assessment, treatment, and prevention.
What are the kinds of patients you care for there?
So we see children from birth to age 18, and we see most of the children, the majority of the children that we see, about 60%, are referred for concerns for sexual abuse.
And by family members, or who usually gives you a referral?
Well, our referrals
Police?
usually come from police or from the child welfare portion of the
CPS
Department of
or
DHS, ODHS. So most of our referrals come from them, and it's not that there's more children being sexually abused than other kinds of abuse happening in general. It's just that we specialize in those assessments of sexual abuse.
Gotcha.
So, certainly what ODHS caseworkers are mainly dealing with is more the physical or the physical abuse, emotional abuse, or neglect. Along with our partners, like oftentimes law enforcement will come and observe the assessment, or DHS may come and observe.
So they're all on your radar. You guys are all working together.
Yeah. So that was the whole reason for doing CACs, is that in the past, if a child had disclosed abuse or neglect, they may have to tell their story. They have to tell their story to the medical provider.
Yes.
They have to tell their story to the detective. They have to tell their story to the forensic interviewer. They might have to tell their story to the social worker. They have to keep telling that story over and over again. And
Gotcha.
that each time is traumatizing for the child. So the idea of the CACs is to bring all those people together.
Do it one time.
Do it one
with
time.
the special expertise that you need.
Yes, and with a lens that is child-centered and trauma-focused.
Tell me about your facility, because I think it's not just the people that are child-centered, but the facility is child-centered as well. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the center was developed specifically to be a child advocacy center. And what it provides is an environment that feels very much like a home. So if you walked into the doors of Children's Center and you walked into our family waiting room, it would look very much like a home environment, as much as possible. When families come into the center, they have their own private space. So the whole time they're there, that space is theirs. So they never have to worry about, if I walk in, is someone going to see me come in? Does a member of my community know I'm here?
Right.
They have privacy.
So it's all confidential.
Yes. The team that's conducting the assessment is made up of a medical provider. And those medical providers have very specific training in assessing child abuse and neglect. And they also give the child a comprehensive physical examination.
Okay.
They have a forensic interviewer, and that person is trained several hours, months of training through a process from the state.
That's impressive.
I'm impressed by it. I mean, that's what inspired me to want to be a part of it.
So
I mean, the excellence.
To me, not everybody knows about it. Like, I mean,
no.
What kinds of events do you do, or fundraising, public? What's the word I'm looking for? Publicity. I don't know too much about this.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. Not a lot of people know necessarily that services like Children's Center are provided in their community. So that is actually a big role that we have to play, is to try to let people know, just build awareness. Build awareness of child abuse and neglect as an issue, or child maltreatment is a public health issue.
Right.
And just try to build awareness of that, and encourage people to understand that if we talk about it, we can actually make progress. It's when we don't talk about something, or we don't want to acknowledge it, it
Really?
doesn't go away. So that's something that we try to do quite a bit. And our staff just all try to be ambassadors, and our board members try to be ambassadors. and to share the work that we do. But we've actually, in the last 5 months, we've really tried to be a lot more out there with our information. Like, we were just at the mall for the month of April. We had a kiosk. We had this huge sign up in the mall. I mean, like, it was humongous.
April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. Okay,
right.
That's cool. And you guys were handing out we
were handing out
pinwheels?
books for children, coloring books around body safety and information for parents, tips that parents can, use.
I want to be part of this.
It's pretty exciting.
Tell me about if someone wanted to learn more about Children's Center, or they wanted to get involved, or maybe they wanted to make a donation. How would they find out more information about Children's Center?
Well, the easiest way is just to go to our website, and it's just childrencenter.cc. But if you just Google Children's Center Oregon City, it's what will show up for you. So
Excellent.
Our website gives you information and tells you how actually now that we're kind of sort of maybe moving into a post-COVID world, we're looking at building up our volunteer base.
Keep my fingers crossed.
And on that site, you can also learn about ways that you can help us. And, absolutely financial donations make a huge difference. We don't make enough money from our contracts to do the comprehensive work that we want to provide. So we have to supplement that with donors, individual donor contributions. So
you get some money from the insurance companies?
We get some money from insurance companies, a small amount from insurance companies, and we get money from the federal Victims of Crime Act, as well as state funds for child abuse multidisciplinary intervention teams.
Okay.
Which is connected to that statutorily mandated service.
Actually, it's
but it
interesting
only
that
pays about
it's required by law, but it's not fully funded.
No, it's not fully funded.
Can't imagine that.
But we're making some progress. We're hoping to make some progress in that area. And also Clackamas County, not all counties do this, but Clackamas County also provides some funding out of their general fund for us to do this work, because we do provide the service to any family in Clackamas County that needs it.
Great. And then there's a certain amount that's just private donations of people. You do fundraising events in the community and stuff like that.
So about 30% of our funding comes from private donations, events.
You said there was 3 folks involved.
Yeah.
A medical person, a forensic interviewer, and a family support specialist. Tell me about how they all work together and how the facility itself plays a role in the care you provide.
Yeah. So while the assessment is happening, our center has been developed specifically to conduct these kinds of assessments. So outside of the family waiting room, which is like all designed for the comfort for the family and for the kids and their sense of calm.
Video games and stuff?
We don't have video games,
Call
but
of
we
Duty?
do have videos. But we also have like a private space kind of in the front where adults could sit quietly. It's a little bit more of an adult space, but kind of beyond that is where the child is working with the forensic interviewer and the medical provider. Initially, the protective caregiver has an opportunity to talk to the whole team about what they're experiencing and what their concerns are. And that helps the team kind of determine, like, what's this assessment going to look like? How are we going to work with this child? Because they've had a chance to talk to the child's caregiver, and the caregiver knows them.
Ahead of time.
That happens like when they come to the assessment. Parents are told who is involved. We try to be as transparent as possible about this process, because
I'm sure it's stressful for everybody.
Yes.
I mean, that's like you're meeting people at some of the lowest places they'll be in their whole life. So
so information, just knowing what's happening, why it's happening, who is there and why they're there, that goes a long way, I think, to helping people feel comfortable. So that a lot of time is actually spent in that, just working with the protective caregiver. Somebody said to me the other day, kids have to be so courageous to come in and tell their story. And I said, I agree, but I think parents have to be courageous too, because their child may have been harmed in some way. And now they're being asked to come to this center with people that they don't know.
Yeah.
They haven't been there before, most likely. how are they, it takes courage to know, to bring a child there and to trust that we're going to care for them. And so we really do try to focus on both the child and the protective caregivers because they're a team in this and they both need to feel that sense of safety. So after they've had a chance to talk to the caregiver, then they'll do the assessment with the child. We have a medical exam room that looks just like any pediatrician's office. If you went into a pediatrician's office, it would look just exactly like this. And then we have a forensic interviewing room, which is set up, looks a little bit like a living room. There's not very much in there, but it has a mirror and an observation room behind it. So law enforcement or DHS, the medical provider, they can sit back there and observe the interview as it's happening and take notes and kind of figure out what things they want to follow up on. But the child knows that. They're told these are this is this window, this is who's sitting behind it. There's microphones, and we also record the forensic interview.
Well, that's inspirational in a very special way, Karen, and I appreciate your time today.
Thanks,
we have a couple of segments that we usually do on the show. I chose 4 words that you may or may not know. In fact, I've never had anybody know all of them. So if you know one of them, you're not supposed to choose that one.
Okay.
You're supposed to learn a new one.
All right.
And then furthermore, we're going to learn about the definition, and you're going to pledge that you're going to try to use this in your everyday, we're going to expand your vocabulary by 1 today. That's the goal of vocabulary time. Your choices are demure, erstwhile, stultify, or susurration. Susurration.
I don't know that I know stultify.
Stultify. To stultify a plan or person is to dampen enthusiasm in a big way.
In a big way.
In a big way. So you put the kibosh on everything.
Oh,
okay,
man.
You're like the wet, limp washcloth that just plops on everything. Mm-hmm. To deprive of strength or efficiency, to make useless or worthless.
Oh.
Their behavior stultified the boss's hard work. This is somebody who's pulling in the opposite direction of what everybody else is doing. Are you a stultifier?
Gosh, I hope not. I hope I'm not. Do you have the antonym for
Yeah,
that?
what's the...
enabler?
Yes.
Supporter? Developer?
Oh, come on,
maximizer?
You're not supposed to show up the host of the podcast with all of your tour de force of the brain power there. Stultify. A person or plan who is there to dampen the enthusiasm in a big way.
In a big way. Well, the only thing I can think of is when I am a stultifier is with my Chihuahua.
Oh, I was going to say with your teenager.
Probably a little bit with that too. Like when I say, it's 2:00, you need to turn off the video game and go to bed now.
Mom, you're such a stultifier.
And I think if my dog Brutus could talk, he would also call me a stultifier because his favorite thing is to stand on top of the couch and bark as loud as he possibly can at anything that walks past. So I often am...
You're a buzzkill.
I am. I mean, he's like, this is my life. This is what it's all about for me, Karen.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, no. Oh, check this out. Okay, Wolfgang Stiller. This guy... he actually was hanging out. So that's him. He's the artist, and he was hanging out behind a studio, like a performing arts studio, and he took found material, like these masks were being thrown out, and so then he went through and put them on matchsticks, so you can see these expressions amazing. And stuff. It's pretty cool. These are like life-size matches that are installed, burnt out. So I think that part of this is they've had their energy just completely used up, and they are exhausted at this point. And so,
wouldn't it be cool if we could think of a different word than burnt out? The only reason I'm saying this is a new idea that just came into my head now, minute.
That's what the podcast is all about.
Because when I look at this, and this is somebody who's burnt out, there's no recovery from this. There's no potential to heal this and have it not be burnt, right? But there's got to be for us as people.
There has to be. And in an ideal world, it would be preventable.
Yeah, but so like, what would be a different like?
Burnt out.
Not burnt out, because burnt out
Emptied? Emptied out?
emptied, because
Like,
you could
refill
something
it.
that is emptied. Lately, we've been doing this work on trauma, vicarious trauma work,
Ooh,
and they've been talking about, they used to call it compassion fatigue,
okay.
but now they're working on calling it empathic strain, because there's a belief that like compassion is like almost bottomless, and it's difficult. Like if you really look at if you really look at like what compassion is, and
That
you
makes
really
sense.
look at it, it's sort of, there's no limit to it. And so you can't necessarily fatigue it, but you can fatigue empathy.
Yes, you can.
And
And so is the point that it's better to be wearing on your empathy where there's boundaries and there's a finite amount versus just kind of constantly wearing away your compassion?
yeah, well, empathy is harder work than compassion, because like compassion, we can have compassion for somebody who, lives 20,000 miles away, and that we have compassion for them. Empathy requires action. Empathy is compassion plus a desire to alleviate or help or support in some way. And so it's a lot harder to do. So that's what we burn out, not burn out,
Yeah.
but that's what we need to replenish.
We utilize that
ourselves,
resource. We
because
can
we're-
extinguish that.
Yeah, because every time we're giving something to somebody, we're giving maybe a little bit of ourselves. And so we have to like refill that. Whereas
Excellent.
compassion is a easier to give, because there's no compelling action behind it.
Probably more dangerous to give, probably more problematic for a person. I mean, I think one of the recent examples of compassion fatigue was like, people who were getting sick, who weren't taking the proper step to get vaccinated and, do mitigation techniques and stuff. And after a while, you're like, okay, look, I mean, I feel bad for you suffering, but, sometimes I wonder, I mean, you made some decisions that were not healthy decisions. Am I still supposed to feel that was, I think they refer to that as compassion fatigue.
Yeah. Compassion is.
You could still always feel empathy for them, and I do. I understand why some people make the decisions they do. I don't always agree with them, but
Yeah. It's COVID tested so many of our
yes,
values and capacities as human beings.
you are the winner of the gold star for Art Vault. Never have I had a Art Vault that has been so compelling and interesting. This is actually our last one. It's just like some
Look at
random.
them.
They're all just kind of
my gosh.
randomly tossed across the floor there.
So
Those are all just burnt out people.
and I think, I mean, obviously the artist is trying to provoke a feeling in us, because he put human faces on the tops of those matches. If they were just strewn there, we would be like, oh, that's artistic or kind of cool looking, but you can't look at that and not think those are humans.
There's a story.
Yeah, those are
I mean,
what happened
those people
to
look
these
like
ones.
me.
They're watching.
Matches
these
don't
ones-
look like
yeah.
me. They look like
I am
me.
never going to be able to burn a match again without thinking about who I'm harming.
Art Vault. Oh,
I'm going to have to get a lighter instead.
And that'll do it for another episode of the Troy Stober Show. I want to thank Karen Rush for being here. Boy, it's been a fascinating discussion. I appreciate learning about Children's Center and your passionate advocacy for children and families. So,
Thanks, Troy, for having me. It's really fun to just sit and talk with somebody.
after 2 years of
not.
COVID not being, I mean, we're not wearing masks.
Yes, and you're not in a little box this big on my
No,
screen. So.
no, it's a pleasure to have
Yeah.
you here. Thank you all for watching.